Angelo Foundation during the work week. Call Angela Thompson between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. at area code 702-456-1606. That's Angela Thompson at area code 702-456-1606. And now, Area 2000. Good evening, and welcome to another Area 2000. It's Sunday night. I'm Art Bell. Events around the world are incredible at the moment. Russia stands, it would seem, on the edge of the possibility of revolution. I've been watching CNN coverage, and we'll keep you informed of any changes. 5 dead in Somalia. Just a whole lot going on in the world this evening. And as I said, I've been, and you might too, pay close attention to CNN coverage. There's a lot going on in the news. Well, we've got our usual lineup of stars for you, and I want to announce, here's a woman with yet another glimpse into another area. In fact, it's called, her segment is called Glimpses of Other Realities. And so let's jump to one of them right now, all the way to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And Linda Howe. Good evening, Linda.
Hi, Art.
Hi.
In this world, as you and George have been talking about, that is both complex at a human level, it is also complex at this strange, phenomenal level. And one of the subjects that has been associated with the UFO field since at least the 1950s has been something called the Men in Black syndrome.
Right.
And I met and interviewed a man in New Jersey who woke up one night to see a strange, small man standing next to his bed. And the more conscious the New Jersey man became, the more he realized that it was not a human man. The skin was white-gray. He could make out enormous black eyes that were slightly hidden behind odd, dark glasses that were shaped like a bow tie. Adding to the bizarre appearance were what the New Jersey man said looked like clothes out of 1930s movies. It was a brimmed hat and a suit jacket with very wide lapels, almost like a trench coat from an old movie. The New Jersey man does not remember what happened next, but the description resembles the notorious Men in Black syndrome reported in UFO history for decades and continuing to date. One researcher of the Men in Black phenomenon is Ray Boucher of Lincoln, Nebraska. He is working on a book manuscript about CMIBs, and tonight talked to me about the classic description of them going back as far as the early part of this century, not only in the United States, but in the Welsh country of England as well. I'd like to play an excerpt of our interview, beginning with a classic description of the Men in Black, and I will play it now.
Generally, they're described as very thin, cadaverous in appearance, very white, waxy or plastic-like skin, generally dressed in dark clothing. There are variations to this. Of course, the military uniform is one. There's been many instances of that. In fact, in 1967, the Pentagon initiated an investigation into the literally dozens of claims that UFO witnesses had been forced to give up photographs and had been harassed by people claiming to be Air Force and military intelligence officers. Generally, though, cadaverous appearance, very tall, very thin, somehow almost always described as looking like they were dead. A very unhuman quality about them. Oftentimes the speech is described as slurred, mechanical, many times slang words which are far outmoded will be used by these individuals. I guess the best way to briefly describe it is they just don't look quite human. Very corpse-like, and many things that simply seem to exude this feeling of non-humanness.
Well, after the Air Force did an investigation, did they make any formal public statement about the identity of anybody?
No, they were never able to track down anything on that, other than to say that, look, these aren't our intelligence people who are doing this, and we're just as interested in catching them as cases which would seem to indicate that they may very well be attempts by government agencies to silence or to squash UFO stories to prevent widespread discussion or widespread panic, if you want to use that term. But those are very few and far between.
So what you're saying is that there may be a really legitimate alien aspect to the MIB syndrome, and it may actually have been mistaken in cases where the government agents themselves trying to intimidate people.
Very much so, yeah. There's definitely a quality of alienness, of non-humanness to the classic MIB cases. If, as you and I know what we meant when we talk about classic mutilations, and this is the same thing with the classic MIB harassment. There's very definitely a sense of otherworldliness, I guess, if you want to put it that way, about these events.
Isn't it true that in the 50s, when they were first reported, that they were wearing clothes which people from the 1920s and 30s?
That's another common thread that seems to run through it. The clothing seems to be out of the period in which they're operating. The same thing with the cars that these entities sometimes appear in. They're almost always described as being 25, 30 years old, but looking very pristine, brand new. Some witnesses who've been fortunate or unfortunate enough, however you look at it, to have been close to these vehicles, even describe the cars as smelling brand new, but yet looking, being, again, a model that may be 20 or 30 years out of date. It's like they're somehow not quite synchronized with the time that they're appearing or jumping into, if you want to put it that way.
Well, not only are the MIB cases out of sync in terms of the clothes, what they have done with people have included asking someone to hand them a coin, having the coin in the hand of the human be stared at by the human, and then the coin disappearing in a glowing blue light, and the MIB saying that where that penny had gone was no longer in this universe. The case of the disappearing penny occurred in the early 1970s when the MIB syndrome was associated with threats and keeping people quiet about the UFO sightings and encounters. All the descriptions of these beings sounded like they were something manufactured, a biological android or perhaps a mechanical robot.
That's really odd. Linda, does all of this, the dress, the vehicles, all of that suggest the possibility of time travel?
Well, something like a time warp would be suggested, that if they are from someplace else in this universe or some other reality, and they are copying something about our planet, they're getting off by a few decades, apparently. And in addition to their being out of sync with the current time period, wherever they're from, there also is this issue of why is it that they say things to people that some people interpret as threats and other people do not? It is as if the phenomenon is self-contradictory. It seems to expose itself on purpose, including these rather clumsy MIBs that are not even disguised well, and then warns against talking. So there is this putting itself out there, being very present, and saying, no, don't talk about it. It's not logical in human terms. And I think one more contradiction about the men in black syndrome, which continues today, are the mixed messages. While some people have felt threatened by them, others don't. The New Jersey man told me that he has never felt threatened. He's been an abductee for years. He thinks that the alien intelligence involved, which he doesn't understand well, but he does think it disguises itself in many forms, while it actually is monitoring Earth life. The big question all of us would like to know is why? Why the monitoring? Why the interaction with us, even at these strange levels of the men in black syndrome? And for any of our Area 2000 listeners who have had their own MIB encounters, anything similar to what Ray was describing or me, Ray investigate hearing from anyone about their encounters, and I'd like to give his post office box in Lincoln, Nebraska.
All right.
Post office box 30591, Lincoln, Nebraska, zip code 68503. And again, his first name is Ray, and his last name is Boucher, spelled B-O-E-C-H-E. I'm also interested in people's current encounters with anything in what would be the category of non-human entities or beings, whether it's men in black or any of the other alien types that we've described in our program. And I'd like to give a young girl address, which is Linda Howe at Post Office Box 538, Huntingdon Valley, Pennsylvania, and the zip code is 19006. I would welcome letters from any of our listeners on their own experiences.
Linda, what was your zip code again, please?
19006.
Got it.
And that's it for tonight, Art. And I, too, look forward to hearing the tape on Dick Haynes. I have known him for a long time. I respect his work enormously. And I think that Dick has a wide range, going all the way from the hard reports of airline pilots and scientists to his work on abductees and his research in the Soviet Union. This should be quite an interview.
It should be. Linda, wonderful, fascinating segment
Thank you.
this morning. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
That's Linda Howe, and another glimpse into yet another reality, the Men in Black syndrome. Fascinating. Particularly the aspect about the dress and the setting of the vehicles observed. Fascinating. My guest coming up is Dr. Richard F. Haynes. He's got a tremendous background, and I have a couple of pages of bio, and this is a synopsis of probably about 20 pages or so. And so I'm not really sure how to approach this. His academic background includes the University of Washington's...
Of course it would. And when you analyze the geometry of the cargo bay, the camera, the illumination source, there are a number of spotlights there, and where the thrusters are back in the tail section, for pitch, by the way, it works out beautifully. Okay?
All right, well, I'm glad you explained that. You're the first one who's been able to explain that to my satisfaction. I couldn't figure out how it would do such a thing. A lot of people want to talk to you. Let us continue. First time caller line, you're on the air with Dr. Haynes on KDWN. Good evening.
Yeah, I was wondering if the doctor had ever had any experience with Men in Black.
That is a good question. Dr. Linda Howe talked of the Men in Black phenomenon. What could you tell us?
What can I tell?
Are you familiar with the Men in Black business?
Oh, yes, I remember when it first, almost first came out many, many years ago. And even back then, there was very poor evidence for it. It was always hypothetical or conjectural, almost in the level of mythology. And I, frankly, have not ever met anybody who claims to have had that experience myself. Met someone like that.
Well, it seems to me, with all the evidence that you have, you should have already had a visit.
I'm afraid I haven't.
All right. I want to get this out on the air because it is important. We have a bulletin here from Moscow. A group of at least 8 tanks is moving toward the Russian White House right now. So it sounds as though there's about to be trouble, Doctor, in Moscow, as you pointed out earlier.
Yes, unfortunately, I think you're right.
All right. Line 1, good evening. You're on the air with Dr. Haynes in Las Vegas.
Hey, how you doing?
All right, sir.
Okay. It's a two-part question, and I'll take the answer off the air.
All right.
Okay. Part 1. Doctor, are you familiar with the biblical reference to UFOs?